So we will switch now to the server part, which is App Engine. So I will open my stuff again. So I know that not many of you are writing Python. Anybody heard of App Engine before? Yeah, cool. So yeah, just to tell you what it is, it's the Google response to the hassle of having an online application that scales. So it's really just you open a box. You don't get a box, actually. You open a box and you get all the features that will make it possible for you to easily deploy an application that will scale when you get famous. So what's inside? So first of all, scalability. So you will be able to use a few elements of the Google infrastructure to actually run your application. So this means GFS on Bigtable, for instance. So we will come back to it afterwards. You will be able to have a distributed data store, which means that it's just like a database, but running on many, many machines at the same time. For those of you who love Python, or for those of you who want to discover Python, that's the best way to learn it. And you will have lots of APIs and libraries to help you develop your application. It comes with SDK, which means that you download an application that will help you and make it possible for you to develop your application. And when it's finished, you just post it to the cloud and it's running. And of course, you will be able to administer and monitor your application using a web-based dashboard. So that's really, if you want to justify why you're going to spend 3 days learning Python and App Engine, that's really what you should show to your manager. So the main benefits, so it's really easy to use because you can build the whole thing locally on your laptop. When you're finished, you push it in the cloud, and then no matter how many people get connected to it, it will answer in the same manner. And of course, it's easy to manage. So to justify that kind of thing, we can tell you the usual story of people building their own application using Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, for instance. So things usually are fine. You build the first version on your laptop. It is working nice. And then you put it on a web server, and then it's getting really popular, and then you need more servers, and then suddenly your database cannot be hosted on one machine, but has to be split among different machines, and things get more and more complicated. And at the end, you spend much more time building your infrastructure than really building your application. And there was a survey which said that most of the startups actually rebuild the full application several times before really going live. So that's the kind of things that we would like to avoid. So how can you avoid that? So as I said, you just upload your application, and then the Google infrastructure is designed and built to automatically scale on the load that your application may generate, which means that you don't have to take care of all the hassle of adding new servers, adding network configurations, deploying things, etc. Everything is taken care of by Google. And of course, you can use your developer tools to work on it. The other thing that is quite nice as well is even for the migration of your database model, if you add more attributes and stuff, it will be handled nicely. So that's the main idea. You just have to focus on the idea of your application, what it will bring to the user, and we will make sure that it's working no matter how many users there are. So how do you manage that? You have a web-based console, which gives you the basic data about the traffic, about the resources you're taking, and things like this. And you also can version your applications, which means that you can have several versions available and then activate the version you prefer, for instance. So if some of you have gone through the problem of migrating client desktop applications, for instance, you know how valuable it is to just say, okay, from Monday morning on, it will be version 13 of the application. You just go to the dashboard and set it live, and everybody will use it. So that's really a valuable thing as well. So let's have a look at what you get when you use App Engine. So you have just a set of Python libraries, and then you just have something to start your application, and it runs locally. Oops. So this is just a sample application. We can have a look at it this afternoon during the code lab. But the idea is that you run that thing locally, you can modify it and reload it. You have a service running locally that will present it on a local host. And once it's pushed, you have an online dashboard where you can manage your applications. So for instance, this is an application I built for some code labs on maps. So we can have a look. So it gives you the consumption. It gives you the data that you have in your data stores. So you can see every kind of object that was created, monitor it. You have logs of what happened. You have people participating. You have versions. So this is where you will be able to say, okay, this version is deprecated now. I will create a new one, fixing some issues. So the price of App Engine, the good news, it's free up to roughly 5 million page views a month. You won't have to pay anything for it. And then afterwards, the idea is really to provide you with a service, but at a low cost. So that's the pricing that we can apply now. The idea is if you want to go from 5 million page views to 10 million page views, it shouldn't be too expensive, really not expensive at all. So the way you manage quota, you have two types of quotas. The first one is the fixed quotas that protect the system, that will prevent you to send a billion emails every second, for instance. So that's just to be sure that the system is running. And then you can define billable quotas, which when you go above the limits of the free quota. And this can be defined both on a daily basis or on a per minute basis. The administration interface gives you a hint about what you're consuming, and you can also modify your code if you want to be a cheap application. To monitor that quota thing as well. So what's the interest of a web interface? I don't learn you anything in there. You can get from everywhere, nothing to install. And the nice thing is that when you build your application on App Engine, it's just really easy to think about it just like a repository of data and services. And then you can create the whole range of clients, which can be web clients, mobile clients, gadgets, every kind of stuff, just using that main repository. So that's valuable as well. So let's have a look at what an App Engine looks like, an App Engine application looks like. So the first file that you will have to define is the YAML file. So this is just a kind of indicator where you say for every kind of incoming URLs to that application, you will send it somewhere. So you can serve some static files, you can serve some dynamic files. So the main idea is if I've got the URL slash, I will go and call the home.py Python program. If I want style sheets, it's a static file, so I just say that I will take the static files from the directory. You can include some wildcards to be able to pass that as a parameter. And you can protect some part of your website, just to say that that's just for the admin. So that's really the first thing you have to decide. Usually it's quite simple, because behind us, after that, we have an App Engine web app framework. So the way it works is that for every kind of incoming URL, we will call a specific class, and depending on the method, if it's a get or a post, we will call a get or a post of that class. So it's quite simple to really define different actions in that file, and then just call the adequate method. In that case, it will just return content in text and just write to the output a string of text. So that's really the basic. So it's just like CGI, and it's quite simple to put in place. Of course, you don't want to generate all the content of your application using that kind of method. So there are many templating systems that can be used. I had a list over there, like Django, CherryPy, Balance, and WebPy, for instance. So looking at what it does in Django is you will be able to, just like JSPs, you will be able to write your HTML code and put some dynamic things in the HTML code. So for those of you who are used to JSP, you just have to replace the curly brackets by minus and greater than, and it will provide you with the same experience. So in that case, we have an object called greetings, and we will browse through, and if that greeting object has no author, then we write an anonymous person wrote, and if not, we just show the name of that author. So it's really simple to put in place. It's just a templating systems, as there are many of them out there. So the other great thing is the data store. So you will be able to store all your data in a distributed database, which means that no matter how many people are consulting it, you don't have to care. It will be on several machines, but you don't have to care about anything about replicating or distributed database. It's all taken care of by our infrastructure. And it's quite simple. When you define your model, you have object types, which have one ID that identifies the object, and then a set of properties. So properties can have different types. For instance, this would be a string that is required, and then you have a date. You can also store big content in blobs. So all the pictures, all the content you're uploading to your application will be stored in the database as well. When it comes to retrieving those objects, it's just like SQL. So you can run that kind of query. So it's quite self-explanatory, I guess. You just defined an object shout before, and you look for all the shouts that have been issued by Brett. You order that by date, and you fetch the 101st of them. So it's really just like SQL. There are a few limitations because it's distributed, but it's very well documented, and usually you can do without it. The other thing, to be efficient and fast, there is a mechanism to have indexed over the properties of those objects. So some of them are defined automatically when you run the application locally. It just generates a description of the index that you will need in that application, so you don't have to care about anything. And then if you need additional indexes, you can set them up in the YAML configuration file. So there are also a few APIs available with App Engine. So the most simple ones are those three families. So the first one will make it possible for you to fetch content from the application server from any other website and then retrieve it. So for instance, you could use GData just to work on content that is on the Google properties, but you could use any kind of feed just to process it on the server side and then give the result on the client. You also have an API to manage the images. So this means that you will be able to upload, rotate, resize images and store them in blobs. So we can have a look at it this afternoon in the code lab. For instance, for every profile, you can upload a picture, resize the picture, and use the Picasa feature, which is called I'm Lucky, just to update the picture so that it looks nice, for instance. You will be able to send emails as well. For performance reasons, you can implement a cache as well, because if you don't implement the cache, in your administration dashboard, you will see that you consume too much resources, because some queries could be cached and maybe more efficient. So the way it works, it's you just add some results in the cache with a specific tag. And so next time you ask to the cache the result for that tag. If it has it, it gives it back to you right away. And if not, it calculates it and stores it. So this can be, you can really refine your strategy, which means that you can decide to expire data from the cache after 20 minutes, half an hour, 20 days. So it's really something easy to use and which will make a big difference in terms of performance. The other feature that is provided and that is quite handy, it's really simple just to add user authentication in your application. So the way it works is you have a user's method where you can just ask for the connected user to see who he is. If that method returns nothing, then you get a URL that will send you on a login screen. And once you're connected, you will get back to your page. So this is working in the local version as well. It does not do any control, obviously, but you can test everything in the local version. We released recently an application gallery. So this means that once you created your application, that you are satisfied with it and that you think that it can help other people, you can just have it mentioned in the gallery, and then people will be able to find it in that gallery with the most, we have several entries like the most famous applications and things like this. So it's really a way for you to get more users and to be, why not, to get feedback first of all, and then maybe get famous one day, who knows. So that's what I wanted to show you. You cannot read the URL, but it's still on code.google.com/AppEngine. For those of you who want to discover Python and play a little bit around with AppEngine, we have a code lab as well based on AppEngine. So what it's doing, it's just letting you build just a simple wiki page where you will be able to add wiki contributions, have revisions of documents, comments, and enrich the profile of all the users. So if some of you are interested, I will be around as well.
For the AppEngine Code Lab, please visit this one, and you can just click either of these links.